Coming up, disturbing climate predictions paint a foggy picture for major cities and coastal towns. As scientists warn, global warming will cause ocean levels to continue rising for hundreds of years. Can't we just build flood barriers and seawalls to prevent these things from happening?
It's not actually that simple.
And record rains in Chile produce the worst flooding in a decade. But first, environmentalists sound the alarm over a coal mining operation in Germany and a mega polluter in the Netherlands they accuse of dumping waste into local water supplies.
This factory here in the Netherlands is literally making people ill.
This is Just 2 Degrees on TRT World. A facility widely considered the Netherlands' biggest polluter is under scrutiny by environmental agencies and prosecutors who are investigating alleged intentional pollution of groundwater. Hundreds of Greenpeace protesters showed up at the site in the coastal city of IJmuiden with a banner that read, "Tata Steel, you sicken us." And they mean that literally. The company is accused of discharging graphite dust into the atmosphere. This reportedly led, in one instance, to black snow falling in the surrounding area. Tata Steel is also accused of breaking other environmental guidelines, including dumping waste into the local water supply.
Because this factory here in the Netherlands is literally making people ill. 51% more lung cancer in the surrounding area than our national average. That's a staggering number, and that has to change.
And in eastern Germany, anti-coal activists marched near the Wetzau open-pit coal mine. They've got a couple of demands for the organization: that the amount of coal mined in the Lotsitz region not exceed 205 million tons by the year 2038. And they also want an early phasing out of coal in order to comply with the 1.5-degree warming limit set by the Paris Agreement.
Unsere Forderungen hier sind, dass nicht mehr als 205 Millionen Tonnen Kohle hier noch gefördert werden bis 2038. Kohlekraftwerke müssen dafür extrem gedrosselt werden, damit die Arbeitsplätze aber eben auch bis 2038 erhalten werden können. Ganz wichtig ist, dass die Menschen hier eine Chance, eine Perspektive bekommen, und die kann nicht auf einer Technologie von vorgestern aufbauen.
The more we study the effects of climate change, the more we understand about it. And much of what we learn makes for difficult reading. One message which comes through loud and clear is that humans don't have long to cut greenhouse gas emissions to avoid the worst effects, including dangerously high sea levels.
The next 30 years, the footprint that's exposed to routine flooding from high tides under a variety of reasons is going to increase. And the impacts will depend upon what we do to mitigate against those. With less heating, under less emissions, the risk of higher sea level rise amounts is much less. You know, the future is in our hands, and that future does not need to be one of doom and gloom.
But emissions and temperatures continue to rise. And even if we stop that now, experts say dangerously elevated sea levels are still a sure thing.
No matter what humans do, global warming will cause sea levels to rise and keep rising for hundreds or even thousands of years. To stop it, the world would have to go back to pre-industrial era temperatures, and that's not happening. In the last 10 years, sea levels rose more than twice as fast as they did 20 to 30 years ago. Experts say this will go on because it takes the oceans hundreds of years to adjust to rising temperatures. Over centuries, warming waters will keep expanding, glaciers and ice sheets will keep melting, and circulation deep in the ocean will keep adjusting. It's hard to predict, but models made by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change say in the best-case scenario, limiting warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius will see sea levels rise between 1/3 and 1/2 a meter over the next 100 years. In the worst cases, even warmer waters will put hundreds of millions of lives at risk. A 2-meter rise in the next century would displace 1/10 of the planet's population. In the long term, the impacts are even greater. Over the next 200 years, even if warming is limited to 1.5 degrees Celsius, sea levels are predicted to increase between 2 and 3 meters and could go as high as 6 meters if warming is limited to 2 degrees Celsius. Higher temperatures will melt the ice sheets in Greenland and West Antarctica, major Antarctic shelves, and cause catastrophic sea level rises that could wipe out entire cities and countries by the year 2300. While we will see smaller impacts within our lifetime, the delayed reaction of the ocean means continued warming could unleash much worse on the Earth within 2 to 3 generations.
We've got Matt Frost on the program. He chairs both the World Association of Marine Stations and the Marine Climate Change Impacts Partnership. Hi, Matt. It's good seeing you.
Hi, good to see you too.
After listening to what Sarah said, it's extremely scary if you think about it. What are your thoughts on the inevitability of sea level rise to the extent that 10% of the world's population could be displaced?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, one of my other hats, I'm head of International Plymouth Marine Laboratory, and we have a lot of scientists there working on all aspects of climate change. And it's totally true that we are locked in to a considerable degree of impact no matter what we do. I think the important thing is, though, that, I mean, listening to some of the figures from the IPCC, is we still have a chance to do something about that range. There's a huge difference from a sort of a 0.3 or half a meter sea level rise globally to 5 or 6 meters in those extremes.
Matt, do we have time and resources to prevent the worst effects? I mean, can't we just build flood barriers and seawalls to prevent these things from happening?
Well, it's not actually that simple. I mean, one of the things is we're talking about global means for sea level rise, but actually where those impacts are, yeah, there may be certain countries, wealthier countries that have got lots of the right infrastructure. You take something like a country like the Netherlands, who spent decades, perfecting, incredible technical measures to keep the sea out effectively. But you've got other places where they don't have the same resource. They don't have the same capacity for infrastructure. But not only that, it depends on, around the world, some countries are going to have a lot more time. They're not low-lying, essentially. So they might have time to put in all these adaptation measures, sea defenses like you talk about. There are other countries, it's happening too fast, it's happening too quick. We've said the rate is increasing. Places like Bangladesh and other low-lying areas where we just don't have the time. We need to do something very, very quickly.
Matt, do you think us knowing that sea level rise is inevitable works against us? I ask this because what motivation do fossil fuel companies have to stop production now?
Well, I think it's, as I said at the beginning, I think it's important to remember we're talking about a really wide range of scenarios. So what the scientists have done have basically said, if we just carry on as normal, if we don't do anything, then we've got these incredible extremes. But actually, if we start to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, if we start to looking into alternative energies, we do have a chance. We have the best chance, to actually do something about this and stop the worst of those impacts. And also, of course, a lot of the figures we're talking about are in the immediate. We're talking about what's happening up to, say, 2100, so, within this century. But we've got a chance to do something now that then means when we get to 2100, hopefully we'll be in some sort of, stabilizing the situation. If we carry on as we are, actually, some of the figures we've talked about aren't extreme enough. Some of the real extreme figures are really shocking beyond 2100 if we don't do anything at all.
Incredibly scary story. Matthew, thank you so much for your time. Matt Frost there for us. Appreciate it. Well, people in Chile say the rains they experienced in June were the worst they've seen in a decade. There were some striking images from across the country of brown water flowing down the bed of the Mapocho, one of two main rivers which bring water to the capital, Santiago. And as we went to air with this episode, 2 deaths had been reported and several people were missing. These aerial shots show the scale of the devastation across parts of Chile. Flooded communities in the central city of Maule as far as the eye can see. And in Coltauco, the Cachapoal River burst its banks and flooded 80% of the town. There may be no clearer indication in Chile of the devastating effects of global warming.
Se los vino un terremoto de agua. Un terremoto de agua que los ganó por todos lados.
Hundreds of people lost their homes across the country, hospitals were submerged and roads were blocked. This stuck and tilted fire truck highlighted the combined danger of flowing water and thick mud. Authorities resorted to boats and helicopters for rescue operations. In this area of Maule, it seems, no home or establishment was spared.
No, lamentablemente con el dolor de mi alma, pero no se puede hacer nada.
¿Pudieron ingresar al menos? Porque está muy difícil también en el camino.
Sí, ingresamos con el agua hasta acá, adentro, pero a ver si podíamos levantar algo, pero está todo flotando, todo. Cuando digo todo, es todo.
When the rain finally stopped, President Gabriel Boric was out to see the damage. He arranged vaccination shots for residents, hepatitis A, tetanus, and pneumococcus, a bacteria associated with pneumonia and meningitis.
Acá, en estos lugares, en estos momentos en donde se demuestra y donde sale y resurge el arma de Chile. Quiero que sepan que no los vamos a dejar solos y estamos trabajando desde ya para poder llegar con todas las ayudas que sean necesarias. Que nosotros estemos hoy día acá en Licantén nos permite adoptar un compromiso que es existencial. Porque cuando uno de ustedes me abre la puerta de su casa, yo después no me puedo olvidar. Uno adquiere un compromiso que vamos a cumplir. Vamos a seguir acá con ustedes hasta que nos pongamos enteramente de pie.
Global warming has been driving increasingly extreme weather. The recent rains came just months after a severe drought and wildfires that destroyed hundreds of homes and left dozens of people dead. Well, as a result of record-breaking heat and prolonged dry weather, Spain lost more land to wildfires in 2022 than any other European Union country. Now, after a scorching 2023 spring, the nation is again bracing for a brutal summer.
Spain's first summer heat wave this year came in spring, in April, with temperatures soaring up to 20 degrees Celsius above average. Some parts of the country hit nearly 39 degrees, worsening an already profound drought. According to Spain's meteorological agency, it was the hottest spring since records began 60 years ago. In June, temperatures of up to 44 degrees Celsius brought southern parts of the country to a standstill. Local residents struggled to carry on with daily activities.
Hace 3 años tuve 4 insolación, me dio. Golpes de calor en el que pierdes conocimiento y a día de hoy tengo bastante precaución. Precaución que es que le tengo miedo.
Pues frita, la verdad. Yo a estas horas no suelo estar en la calle, pero hoy nos ha tocado y la verdad es que no hay quien lo aguante, la verdad. Y nada, combatirlo pues a piscinas y poco más, porque no se puede hacer mucho más, la verdad.
June heat waves have become more common in recent years, and scientists say that human-induced global heating is to blame.
Ya nos hemos acostumbrado a tener olas de calor en junio, pero realmente hasta hace 10-12 años no era nada frecuente. Teníamos una ola de calor en junio cada 7 años aproximadamente, y en los últimos 12 años se ha triplicado la frecuencia de olas de calor en este primer mes del verano. Claro, los veranos, ya lo hemos comentado desde AMED muchas veces, se alargan, le van ganando terreno al otoño y sobre todo a la primavera. Casi 7 días por década de comienzo temprano del verano.
Last year, between June and August, more than 4,600 Spaniards died of heat-related illnesses, according to the Carlos Health Institute. It's led to a ban on some forms of outdoor work during extreme heat conditions in some parts of the country.
Ya tenemos hecho el protocolo de lo que es la ola de calor. Trabajamos solamente 7 horas. Entramos a las 7 y terminamos a las 2 de la tarde.
According to the World Meteorological Organization, Europe is the world's fastest warming continent, heating twice as fast as the global average since the 1980s. According to a new report, that's an average temperature increase of 2.3 degrees on the continent.
It seems fake chicken will be on the market soon in the US, the second country after Singapore to do so. The American Department of Agriculture has given the green light to 2 companies for the sale of meat grown in laboratories. The companies, Upside Food and Good Meat, both produce sheets of chicken meat grown from cells derived from a sample of livestock cells, which were fed and raised in steel barrels. It sounds a bit odd, but it's a win for environmentalists. Growing meat in labs can help slow down global warming because companies won't need to raise animals and therefore reduce livestock greenhouse gas emissions, which contribute as much as 16% of global emissions. The companies plan to offer their products in luxury restaurants first. It is a fascinating story. Well, we've got Matthew Shribman to discuss it. He's chief scientist and co-founded AimHi Earth, an organization that says it wants everyone to understand the full picture of the climate and nature crisis. Hi there, Matthew. It's good seeing you.
Hi there.
For people who need the clarification, this lab-grown meat is made from real chicken, yes?
So some of the methods of creating this stuff is cellular culture. So you might be using the cells of living animals, but you don't have a full conscious animal that's going through the experience of growing up in a crowded factory farm and ultimately being slaughtered and then put onto your plate. Instead, the growth is done in a lab.
So how accepting do you think regular people will be of eating something that's grown in a lab?
Well, I think that it depends what you think of as being a lab. I mean, in many ways, the way that we brew beer is kind of like a laboratory. We're fermenting another kind of food and we're turning it into another kind of, we're fermenting grains and we're turning that into beer. We've been doing that with bread for millennia. And so for us to take this another step and to find a new way to use the techniques that we understand about the world around us to create food that is going to be better for the challenges of our time, I think that it might take some time for people to adapt and accept lab-grown meat. But
I think your point on beer is well taken. What are your thoughts on the impact this can have on the environment and significantly lower greenhouse gas emissions than obviously livestock and agriculture rearing?
Well, yeah, I mean, agriculture is the second biggest driver, just after fossil fuels, of the climate emergency, which is now causing the death of the living world all around us. And I think we have to remember what we're all worrying about here. We're worrying about nature, the natural world that provides all of our food, the air we breathe, our medicines, the backbone of much of our economy and livelihoods, and the rapid heating of the world caused by burning fossil fuels like coal, petrol and gas, and by agriculture, are driving the collapse of nature that we all depend upon to live. Now, what is it that takes up most of the habitable land on Earth? What's the main driver of deforestation? What's the main reason we've now lost almost all of the world's wetlands and wilderness from Argentina to Indonesia? And the answer is, of course, farming. Farming takes up more habitable land on Earth than anything else on the planet. It takes up more than half of all the habitable land on the planet. Now, the reason for that, which many will know, but many don't know, is that 20% of the farmland is growing crops for humans to eat. And that provides about 80% of our food. So it's really efficiently used land. And it has its problems like overuse of pesticides and chemical fertilizers, but it's really efficient. Now, if we spread it over a bit more space, we could make it a bit less efficient and use less pesticides and less chemical fertilizers, and this would be great for everything alive on Earth, but we need to find space for that. So what is that other 80% of our farmland doing? Well, that's farmland that is used to create animal products for humans to eat, and it only provides about 20% of our food. Why? Simply because rearing animals to eat is tremendously inefficient as a use of the world's energy and resources.
I really appreciate the perspective, Matthew, particularly since you have a farming background. Really nice having you on Just 2 Degrees. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Indigenous communities in Ecuador's Amazon region are in disagreement over the extraction of oil in the Yasuni National Park. Environmental groups are hoping a referendum can stop it, while others who benefit defend the industry.
Nosotros queremos que siga saliendo los petróleos de aquí, y si no, ¿con qué nos van a dejar nuestras embarcaciones, nuestras bucetas que tenemos contratadas acá a la empresa y otros compañeros que están trabajando? También las comunas que son de aquí del cantón, ¿en qué vamos a quedar nosotros? En nada.
Sobrevivir en ese momento, ¿no? Lo que nosotros estamos buscando con la consulta popular del Yasuní es salvar el lugar más biodiverso del planeta, que es territorio de pueblos indígenas en aislamiento, que no se están beneficiando de ninguna manera de estas actividades extractivas, sino que lo que dice la Comisión Interamericana de Derechos Humanos es que se les están vulnerando sus derechos.
We've discussed plastic a lot on this program. It is, after all, a growing problem. There's more than 7 billion tons of it out there, polluting ecosystems and posing serious threats to human and animal well-being. Removing it is arguably one of humanity's biggest challenges. There's a tiny creature which could one day provide a solution.
These worms can eat plastic, and researchers are trying to use them to completely change what happens to plastic trash, including turning it into some surprising things. Here's what's going on. These worms have 2 enzymes in their saliva that break down polyethylene, which is the most commonly produced plastic, and they have bacteria in their gut that helps them digest it. But to have a real impact on our trash, these enzymes have to work much faster. Using AI, scientists simulated an accelerated evolution of these enzymes, resulting in fast petase, P-E-T-A-S-E, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, an enzyme capable of breaking down plastic in a matter of days rather than centuries. But there's more. When this plastic is broken down, it can be upcycled into entirely new compounds, including vanillin, the main chemical compound in vanilla flavoring. Rather than downcycling into worse plastic, we could potentially use these chemical compounds in flavoring, medication, clothing, or cosmetics. This stuff is wild, so thank you, little worm.
Let's discuss this fascinating topic with Janet Storey. She's coordinator of Plastics Rebellion, an activist-driven organization that believes in a world where the land, sky, oceans, and water are home to an abundance of life, not an abundance of plastic. Hi there, Janet. It's nice seeing you.
Hello, hi.
Hello. So Miss @Cleo Abram on Instagram just gave us a bit of information there. Can you put all this in perspective for us? Are these worms the answer to our plastic waste problem?
In a word, no. Okay, so they are not a circular option. They're very much end of pipe. So they almost are giving a green light to us to keep proliferating plastic production by telling us that it's all okay, something's going to eat it all. And this throws up so many questions. I've tried to research this myself, and this kind of research is as new and as untried at scale as carbon capture and storage technology is when it comes to the climate crisis.
Wow, I did not expect that response from you. I honestly thought, wow, what a ray of hope these worms are. So, I mean, obviously, I guess you think that we should just stop producing plastic entirely.
We are producing, well, polyethylene alone, which is what these wax worms are purported to degrade. We're making over 100 million tons a year of polyethylene alone. And a recent Minderoo Foundation survey found that actually plastic production is increasing despite all of their initiatives. It's increasing. So I feel that we can't start to mop up the mess before we've switched off the tap. And that is not to say that these worms, you know, may not be able to help deal with some of the enormous amount of stuff that's out there in the environment already. But I just don't think this is a green light for us to keep merrily producing in the understanding that, you know, it's all going to get sorted out. It has to come with a massive caveat. And also, plastics are full of forever chemicals such as PFAS, antimony. Where do these go? What are these creatures excreting? Who funded this research? There's so many questions that need answering.
All right, relevant questions. I really appreciate this conversation. It really helped me put things into perspective. Thank you so much, Janet. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you.
Well, climate change has had a serious effect on the Rhine River between Germany and France. Jeremy Fuchs, the last French fisherman left making living fishing its waters, has seen it through a flood which killed hundreds of people in 2021, drought in 2022, and now warming waters mean his catch is changing as well. Catfish, once only 10 to 15% of his haul, now account for 20%. He can still support himself, but changing temperatures make him wonder for how long. But that's it from us on this episode. Before we leave you, it's hard to forget how hard the monsoon season hit both India and Bangladesh last year. Flooding left over a dozen people dead and millions homeless, and now the annual rains are back. The season runs from June to September, and flooding, property loss, and loss of life are all too familiar results. The weather, scientists say, is affected by global warming. The rains are more erratic and interspersed, and dry spells are longer too. Until next time, bye.